There's a mountain in Colorado built to survive a nuclear war, still humming along today. There's a vault in Atlanta with one recipe in it, guarded like it's a nuclear launch code, because to the company that owns it, it basically is. Some places are locked down because of danger, some because of secrecy, some because a handful of rich or powerful people simply decided the rest of us don't get to come in. Here are the 50 most forbidden places on Earth you're not allowed to visit. Number 50, Area 51, Nevada, USA. Start with the obvious one because it earned it. Area 51 is a United States Air Force facility inside the Nevada Test and Training Range, and for decades the government wouldn't even confirm it existed. It was used to test experimental aircraft, including the U-2 and SR-71 Blackbird, both of which flew so high and so strange for their era that eyewitness reports of them likely fed a chunk of the UFO sightings from the 1950s and 60s. The site wasn't officially acknowledged by the CIA until 2013 in a declassified history of the U-2 program. Before that, the government's standard answer to any question about the base was simply that it didn't have a comment, which is a very funny way to run a place with its own zip code. The perimeter is marked with motion sensors, cameras, and signs warning that use of deadly force is authorized against anyone crossing the boundary. Unmarked vehicles, sometimes referred to locally as camo dudes, patrol the surrounding desert and will intercept trespassers long before they get anywhere near a runway. The nearby town of Rachel, Nevada, population barely in the double digits, has built its entire tourism economy around people driving out just to stand at the gate and take a photo of a sign. Nobody gets past them. Number 49, North Sentinel Island, Andaman Islands, India. This is the one place on this list where getting close isn't just illegal, it's a genuine death sentence. The Sentinelese are an uncontacted tribe who have lived on this island for tens of thousands of years and have made it repeatedly, violently clear they want to be left alone. In 2018, an American missionary named John Chow paid local fishermen to take him near the island and was killed on the beach within a day of landing. The Indian government has banned all travel within several miles of the shoreline, not to protect outsiders' curiosity, but because Sentinelese have no immunity to diseases the rest of the world carries, and contact could wipe them out entirely. Earlier contact attempts, including anthropological visits in the 1970s and 90s that left gifts like coconuts and pots on the beach, occasionally ended peacefully, but just as often ended with arrows. Indian fishermen who drifted too close in 2006 were killed as well. Population estimates for the tribe vary widely, anywhere from a few dozen to a few hundred people, because nobody has ever gotten close enough to actually count them properly, and that's exactly how Indian law intends to keep it. Number 48, Vatican Secret Archives, Vatican City. Despite the name, secret here is closer to private than conspiracy. The Apostolic Archive, as it's officially known since a 2019 rename, holds over 50 miles of shelving with centuries of correspondence, state papers, and church records, some dating back to the 8th century. Access is restricted to qualified researchers who apply in advance, and even then, entire sections remain closed. Pope Leo XIII opened parts of the archive to outside scholars back in 1881, which is more openness than most people assume exists, but the bulk of it is still off-limits to anyone without credentials and a very specific reason for being there. The archive holds documents like correspondence tied to the trial of the Knights Templar and communications involving Henry VIII's request for a marriage annulment, letters that shaped centuries of European history sitting quietly in climate-controlled storage. Applications for access can take months to process, and researchers must specify exact document requests in advance, since browsing shelves the way you'd browse a public library simply isn't how this place works. Number 47, Svalbard Global Seed Vault, Norway. Built into a mountainside on a remote Norwegian archipelago, this vault holds over 1 million seed samples from nearly every country on Earth, a backup copy of humanity's food supply in case of global catastrophe. It sits 130 meters inside a mountain, kept naturally cold by permafrost, with the deep freeze doing the rest. Depositors can retrieve their own seeds, but general tourists simply cannot walk in. In 2017, meltwater actually flooded the entrance tunnel, which is an uncomfortable irony for a facility designed to survive climate collapse, and it prompted Norway to spend millions waterproofing the entrance further. The vault has already been used for its intended purpose once, when researchers in Syria withdrew seeds in 2015 to rebuild collections lost to the country's civil war, then later redeposited fresh copies once conditions stabilized enough to do so. Roughly 6,000 species are represented inside, and the vault is designed to keep even the most fragile samples viable for centuries without power, relying purely on the surrounding permafrost to maintain the freeze. Number 46. Fort Knox, Kentucky, USA. The United States Bullion Depository at Fort Knox holds a significant portion of America's gold reserves behind a 22-ton door, inside a facility ringed by fencing, minefields reportedly used in the past, and soldiers with standing orders. No sitting president has been allowed inside since Franklin D. Roosevelt visited in the 1940s, and the last time outsiders were let in for any real look was a supervised 1974 visit for members of Congress and the press, done specifically to quiet rumors the gold had secretly been removed. It hadn't. As one Treasury official put it dryly at the time, the gold is right where it's supposed to be. The depository sits on Army property, ringed by fencing, alarms, and a garrison capable of responding immediately to any breach, and the exact interior floor plan has never been publicly released. Persistent online rumors claiming the gold is missing or was quietly swapped for tungsten bars have circulated for years without a shred of verified evidence, and officials have periodically had to shoot them down anyway, mostly because a locked door tends to invite exactly that kind of speculation. Number 45. Bohemian Grove, California, USA. A 2,700-acre redwood campground north of San Francisco, owned by a private men's club founded in 1872, currently home to a summer retreat that has, at various points, hosted presidents, CEOs, and power brokers under a strict no cameras, no outsiders policy. The club's opening ceremony, called the Cremation of Care, involves burning an effigy at the foot of a giant owl statue, which is exactly the kind of detail that kept conspiracy theorists busy for decades. Members insist it's mostly golf, drinking, and networking, along with theatrical performances the club has staged since the 1880s. And there's genuine documentary evidence supporting that milder version too. A few journalists and activists have snuck in over the decades with hidden cameras, capturing footage of the owl ceremony that mostly confirmed it looks exactly as theatrical and strange as described, rather than anything more sinister. Nobody outside the club gets to confirm which version is closer to true on a given year, because nobody outside the club gets in. Number 44. Poveglia Island, Italy. A small island in the Venetian lagoon with one of the darker resumes on this list. It was used as a quarantine station for plague victims for centuries, and later became a mental hospital that operated into the 20th century before closing in 1968. Local legend claims the soil is partly made of human ash from mass cremations, though there's no verified record backing the exact numbers often thrown around. The Italian government auctioned a 99-year lease on the island in 2014, but the winning bid was ultimately abandoned after financing fell through, leaving the island in a strange limbo, technically for lease, practically untouched. Access for the general public remains essentially non-existent, and most visits require special permission that's rarely granted, largely because the buildings themselves are structurally unsound after decades of abandonment rather than because of any ghost story. Fishermen in the area have long avoided casting nets too close, citing old superstitions about what still sits under the water. Number 43, Chapel of the Tablet, Axum, Ethiopia. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church claims this small chapel in the town of Axum holds the actual Ark of the Covenant, brought there according to tradition by the son of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. One single monk is chosen to guard it, and that monk never leaves the chapel grounds for the rest of his life. No archaeologist, journalist, or outsider of any kind has ever been permitted to see the object itself, verify it exists, or confirm what it actually is. The church has never allowed independent inspection, so the entire claim rests on faith and tradition, rather than anything that's ever been examined. Even Ethiopian government officials and visiting heads of state have been denied entry over the years, and the current guardian, like every guardian before him, was chosen by his predecessor and effectively hands the role down for life once he accepts it. Historians and biblical scholars remain openly divided on whether the object exists at all in the form described, and the church has shown no interest in settling that debate. Number 42. Lascaux Caves, France. Discovered in 1940 by teenagers chasing a dog into a hole in the ground, Lascaux contains roughly 17,000 years' worth of Paleolithic cave paintings, some of the finest prehistoric art ever found. The cave was opened to the public after World War II, and within about 15 years, the carbon dioxide, heat, and humidity from thousands of daily visitors started damaging the paint. France closed it entirely in 1963. A fungal outbreak in the early 2000s, followed by a black mold problem a few years later, made the closure decision look even smarter in hindsight, since both outbreaks were traced back to changes in airflow and temperature caused by human traffic. Today, tourists see a meticulously built replica nearby, first opened in 1983 and expanded since, reproducing the paintings down to minor cracks in the original rock. The real cave is checked periodically by a small monitoring team in protective gear, while the original artwork, older than the pyramids by roughly 12,000 years, stays sealed off from everyone else. Number 41. Metro 2, Moscow, Russia. Rumored since the Soviet era, Metro 2 is said to be a secret second subway system running beneath Moscow, built to move government and military officials during a crisis, separate from the public metro everyone rides. Russian authorities have never officially confirmed its existence or provided a map, and most of what's known comes from defector accounts and unverified leaks rather than anything documented. Whether it's a sprawling parallel network or a smaller set of connected bunkers is genuinely unclear from the outside, and estimates on its total length have varied enormously depending on which defector or leaked document you happen to believe. Some accounts describe it connecting the Kremlin to the FSB headquarters, a government airport, and underground command bunkers built during the Stalin era. Either way, no civilian has ever produced verified footage from inside it, and Russian officials have consistently declined to comment on whether any of it is even real. Number 40. Diego Garcia, British Indian Ocean Territory. A coral atoll in the middle of the Indian Ocean, leased by the United Kingdom to the United States as a joint military base since the late 1960s. Getting here isn't just difficult, it's essentially impossible without military orders, since there's no civilian airport, no tourism infrastructure, and no legal path onto the island for the public. The base's history carries real weight, too. The original Chagassian population was forcibly removed in the early 1970s to make way for the facility, a decision the UK Supreme Court and international courts have since criticized. In 2024, the UK agreed to hand sovereignty back to Mauritius while retaining the base itself under a long-term lease, a deal that took years of negotiation and still left many displaced Chagassians unhappy with the outcome. The base itself has served as a staging point for American operations across the Middle East and South Asia for decades, and its remote location, far from major shipping lanes and news cameras, has made it one of the least photographed military installations of its size anywhere on the planet. Number 39. World of Coca-Cola Vault of the Secret Formula, Atlanta, USA. Coca-Cola's exact formula is one of the most tightly held trade secrets on the planet, reportedly known in full by only a small handful of people at any given time, none of whom are supposedly allowed to travel together. The physical vault sits inside the World of Coca-Cola Museum in Atlanta, behind a door that looks like it was built for a bank rather than a soda company. Visitors can walk right up to it, take photos, even feel a little thrill standing near it. But what's actually inside stays exactly as mysterious as it was before they showed up. The formula was reportedly kept in an Atlanta bank vault for over 80 years before the company moved it into this purpose-built display vault in 2011, treating a soda recipe with roughly the ceremony most institutions reserve for state secrets. Coca-Cola has occasionally leaned into the mystery for marketing purposes, once claiming to briefly reveal the original 1886 formula in 2011, a stunt many food historians treated with a healthy dose of skepticism. Number 38. Granite Mountain Records Vault, Utah, USA. Built into solid granite in Little Cottonwood Canyon, this facility belongs to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and stores an enormous archive of genealogical records, microfilm, and digital backups meant to survive almost anything short of a direct nuclear strike. The vault has multiple blast-proof doors and was reportedly designed to withstand a nuclear detonation from several miles away. It's not open to public tours, and the church has kept details about the interior deliberately limited, treating the preservation of historical and religious records as important enough to justify serious, decades-long investment in physical security. Construction began in 1958, and the facility has since become one of the largest genealogical archives on Earth, holding records the church has digitized and made available to the public online, even while the physical vault itself remains completely closed. The temperature and humidity inside are kept tightly controlled, since microfilm degrades quickly outside a narrow range, meaning the vault's security is as much about climate as it is about locks. Number 37. Ilha da Queimada Grande, Brazil. Also known as Snake Island, this is one of the few entries here where the forbidden part comes entirely from nature rather than any government agency. The island is home to the golden lancehead pit viper, a species found nowhere else on Earth, with venom potent enough to kill a person in under an hour if untreated. Estimates on population density vary wildly depending on the source, but even conservative counts put multiple snakes per square meter in some areas. The Brazilian Navy restricts civilian access, and the only people who legally go there are researchers, usually accompanied by medical personnel just in case, given that the nearest hospital is roughly a 35-minute helicopter flight away. Local folklore includes stories about a lighthouse keeper's entire family dying after snakes reportedly got inside their home through a window, though the tale has never been formally documented. What's better documented is the island's role in scientific research into antivenom, since the golden lancehead's unique venom has made it genuinely valuable to medical researchers despite, or maybe because of, how dangerous it is. Number 36. Surtsey Island, Iceland. Surtsey didn't exist before 1963. It formed from an underwater volcanic eruption off the southern coast of Iceland, and, within a few years, scientists realized they had something almost nowhere else on Earth offers, a brand new island where they could watch life colonize a landmass completely from scratch. Iceland restricted general access almost immediately to keep that process uncontaminated by human introduction of seeds, insects, or bacteria. Only a small number of scientists are allowed to land each year, under strict protocols that include disinfecting boots and equipment before setting foot on the island to avoid introducing anything that shouldn't be there. It became a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2008, specifically because of how untouched it's remained, and researchers have used it to track, almost in real time, exactly how plants, insects, and eventually birds naturally find and colonize a completely sterile new landmass. The island has also been steadily shrinking due to erosion since the eruption ended, meaning it's a research site with a built-in expiration date. Number 35, Niihau, Hawaii, USA. Known as the Forbidden Isle, Niihau has been privately owned by the same family, the Robinsons, since they purchased it from the Hawaiian Kingdom in 1864. The current population is small and largely native Hawaiian, and the family has kept the island deliberately isolated, without paved roads, without a real hotel, and without open tourism, largely to preserve traditional Hawaiian language and culture with as little outside disruption as possible. Visitors need an invitation from a resident or a spot on one of the extremely limited hunting or helicopter tours the family occasionally permits. Tours that skirt the coastline and a handful of approved sites rather than granting run of the island. Niihau residents speak Hawaiian as a first language more consistently than almost anywhere else in the state, which is a big part of why the Robinson family has guarded the island's isolation so fiercely for over 150 years. Even most Hawaii residents have never set foot there, and locals on neighboring islands often just refer to it by its nickname rather than its actual name. Number 34. RAF Menwith Hill, North Yorkshire, England. Officially a Royal Air Force station, Menwith Hill is widely understood to be one of the largest electronic monitoring stations on the planet, operated jointly with the U.S. National Security Agency. It's instantly recognizable from a distance because of its dozens of massive white golf ball-shaped radomes, which conceal satellite dishes used for signals intelligence. The base has been the subject of protests since the 1990s over surveillance concerns, and its exact capabilities have never been fully disclosed by either government. Though leaked documents from Edward Snowden in 2013 suggested it played a role in broader global surveillance programs run jointly by American and British intelligence. It remains an active military installation, and unauthorized entry is treated the way any country treats trespassing on a working intelligence base, meaning arrest first and questions later. Local campaigners still hold an annual demonstration outside the fence line, a tradition running for decades with no real change in the base's operations. Number 33. Pine Gap, Northern Territory, Australia. Officially, the Joint Defence Facility, Pine Gap, this site near Alice Springs is jointly run by Australia and the United States and is widely reported to support satellite surveillance and signals intelligence gathering across a huge swath of the globe. Its exact operational details have never been made fully public by either government, which has made it a magnet for protest and speculation since it opened in the late 1960s. Several activists have been arrested over the decades for entering the site's restricted perimeter, including a group in 2016 that was later convicted under Australian Defence Facility trespass laws. The base is easily identifiable from a distance thanks to its cluster of large white radomes sitting incongruously in the middle of the Australian outback, which has made it something of a local landmark, even though nobody without clearance can get remotely close. Both governments have periodically acknowledged its general purpose in vague terms, while stopping well short of detailing what specific intelligence work actually happens there day to day. Number 32. NSA Utah Data Center, Bluffdale, Utah, USA. Publicly, this is a data storage facility for the National Security Agency, and privately, it's exactly what it sounds like. An enormous complex reportedly capable of holding staggering volumes of intercepted communications and other digital intelligence. Its true storage capacity has never been officially confirmed, which hasn't stopped estimates from journalists and researchers ranging into territory that's hard to even picture. The facility opened in 2014 after construction delays tied partly to electrical issues, including a series of power surges during testing that reportedly damaged equipment and pushed the opening back by months. It remains one of the most heavily secured, least explained buildings the U.S. government operates on domestic soil, surrounded by fencing, checkpoints, and a visible security presence that stands out even against the quiet backdrop of suburban Utah surrounding it. Local residents largely know it simply as the Spy Center, a nickname that stuck far better than its official title ever did. Number 31. Cheyenne Mountain Complex, Colorado, USA. Built inside a granite mountain and completed in 1966, Cheyenne Mountain was constructed to survive a direct nuclear strike and has served for decades as a command center for North American Aerospace Defense Command. The complex sits behind blast doors, weighing 25 tons each, mounted on giant springs to absorb shock from an explosion. It briefly moved to a reduced staff status in 2006 before NORAD shifted key functions back there in 2015 amid renewed concerns over electromagnetic pulse threats from potential adversaries. The complex is famous for tracking Santa's flight path every Christmas Eve as a lighthearted public tradition, a strange bit of softness from a facility otherwise built entirely around nuclear survivability. It remains an active military facility, and public access has never been part of the plan, though it has occasionally hosted small, tightly controlled press tours over the decades to demonstrate its capabilities. Number 30. Mount Weather Emergency Operations Center, Virginia, USA. Tucked into the Blue Ridge Mountains, Mount Weather is operated by the Federal Emergency Management Agency and has long been rumored to serve as a relocation site for top government officials in the event of a catastrophic attack on Washington, D.C. Its existence became widely known after a 1974 plane crash near the site drew unexpected press attention to a facility that had operated quietly for decades. The complex reportedly includes its own power, water, and broadcasting systems designed to keep essential government functions running even if the rest of the country's infrastructure goes dark. Congressional oversight of the facility has historically been limited, with even some lawmakers noting they knew little about its operations, despite it being funded through federal budgets they approved. Its role expanded further after the September 11th attacks in 2001, when continuity of government planning took on renewed urgency across the federal government, reportedly increasing both funding and activity at the site. Number 29. Raven Rock Mountain Complex, Pennsylvania, USA. Nicknamed Site R, this is another underground continuity of government facility, this one straddling the Pennsylvania-Maryland border and reportedly serving as a backup command post for the Pentagon. It's been operational since the 1950s, built during the early Cold War, when the threat of nuclear attack on Washington felt immediate rather than theoretical. Details about its interior remain sparse by design, and it's periodically referenced in reporting about where senior officials would be moved during a national emergency, though the Department of Defense has never provided a detailed public tour or floor plan. The site reportedly became active during the September 11th attacks in 2001, when officials scrambled continuity of government protocols in real time for the first time since the facility's Cold War construction. Locals in the area have long referred to it simply as the Underground Pentagon, a nickname officials have neither confirmed nor bothered denying. Number 28. North Brother Island, New York, USA. Sitting in the East River between the Bronx and Rikers Island, North Brother Island once housed Riverside Hospital, a facility used to isolate patients with infectious diseases. Most famously, Mary Mallon, known as Typhoid Mary, who was quarantined there for years. The hospital later served as housing for veterans and then a treatment center for young people struggling with addiction before closing entirely in the 1960s. New York City now manages it as a bird sanctuary, and public access is banned to protect nesting herons, which means one of the city's strangest abandoned sites is currently off-limits, mostly for the birds' benefit. The island was also the site of one of New York's deadliest disasters, when the steamship General Slocum caught fire nearby in 1904, killing over 1,000 passengers, many of whom died trying to swim to the island's shore. Today, the crumbling hospital buildings sit reclaimed almost entirely by trees and vines, occasionally photographed by researchers granted rare, supervised access for conservation purposes. Number 27. Chernobyl New Safe Confinement Interior, Ukraine. After the 1986 disaster, the original hastily built sarcophagus over Reactor 4 began deteriorating, so a massive steel structure called the New Safe Confinement was slid into place over it in 2016, designed to contain radioactive material for at least a century. While guided tours now bring visitors into parts of the wider Chernobyl exclusion zone, the interior of the confinement structure itself, right up against the reactor's remains, stays restricted to specialized workers in protective gear, working limited shifts to control radiation exposure. Deep inside sits a mass nicknamed the Elephant's Foot, a solidified lump of melted nuclear fuel and building material so radioactive that brief, unprotected exposure near it in the disaster's immediate aftermath could have been lethal within minutes. It's one of the most heavily engineered keep-out zones humans have ever built, funded by an international consortium precisely because letting it fail simply wasn't an option anyone was willing to risk. Number 26. Tomb of Qin Shi Huang, Xi'an, China. China's first emperor was buried around 210 BC in a massive underground complex, famously guarded by the Terracotta Army, thousands of life-sized clay soldiers discovered by farmers in 1974. The soldiers are open to tourists, but the emperor's actual burial chamber has never been excavated. Ancient texts describe rivers of mercury flowing through a model of his empire inside, and modern soil samples around the site have shown unusually high mercury concentrations, lending some credibility to the old accounts. Chinese archaeologists have deliberately left it sealed, partly out of respect and partly because current preservation technology isn't considered advanced enough to excavate it safely, a lesson learned the hard way after some early terracotta soldiers lost their painted color within minutes of exposure to air once unearthed. Ancient historian Sima Qian, writing roughly a century after the emperor's death, described a ceiling embedded with pearls representing constellations, and while nobody has confirmed that detail firsthand, ground-penetrating surveys have at least confirmed the tomb's general structure lines up with his account. Number 25. Bank of England, Gold Vault, London, UK. Beneath the Bank of England sits one of the largest gold repositories in the world, reportedly holding several thousand tons of gold bars belonging to the UK government and other nations who store their reserves there. Access requires multiple layers of security clearance, and even bank employees who work nearby don't casually walk in. The vault made headlines in 2021 after Venezuela's government lost a lengthy legal battle to withdraw roughly $1 billion worth of its own gold, with UK courts ultimately siding against release amid disputes over the country's legitimate leadership. The vault's gold bars are stored on shelving units organized by owner, and staff reportedly move them using specialized trolleys rather than by hand, since a single standard gold bar weighs around 12.4 kilograms, heavier than most people expect when they picture it. It remains one of the few places on Earth where a country's entire financial credibility can, quite literally, be measured shelf by shelf. Number 24. Federal Reserve Bank of New York Vault, USA. 80 feet below street level in Manhattan, resting directly on Manhattan's bedrock, sits a vault holding gold owned largely by foreign governments and international institutions rather than the US itself. Each nation's gold is kept in its own sealed compartment, and the bars aren't typically moved between countries physically when ownership changes hands, just reassigned between compartments within the same room. Public tours exist, but are heavily monitored, photographed constantly, and don't get anywhere near the actual gold-filled compartments, which remain firmly closed to anyone without Federal Reserve clearance. The vault sits on Manhattan bedrock specifically because the ground there is stable enough to support the sheer weight of the gold stored above it, and the room itself is sealed by a 9-foot, 90-ton steel cylinder door that rotates into place like something out of a submarine hatch. Guards reportedly change into felt-soled shoes before entering, purely to protect the floor from scuffing. Number 23. Ise Grand Shrine, Naiku, Japan. Ise Jingu is considered the most sacred site in Shinto, dedicated to the sun goddess Amaterasu, and is rebuilt entirely from scratch every 20 years in a tradition called Shikinen Sengu that has continued, with a few historical interruptions, since the 7th century. The innermost sanctuary, where the shrine's sacred object is kept, is hidden behind wooden fences and can only be entered by Shinto priests and members of the imperial family. Ordinary visitors, including most Japanese citizens, can approach the outer gates and pray, but the actual inner shrine remains something almost nobody alive has ever seen. The rebuilding tradition itself is treated as a form of renewal rather than replacement, with craftsmen passing down centuries-old carpentry techniques generation to generation. Specifically so, the practice never dies out. The most recent rebuilding took place in 2013, drawing an estimated several million visitors to the wider shrine grounds that year, even though the sanctuary at the very center stayed exactly as hidden as it always has. Number 22. White's Club, London, UK. Founded in 1693, White's is the oldest gentlemen's club in London and one of the most exclusive private clubs in the world, with a membership list that has included British royalty for generations, most notably King Charles III, who held his stag party there before marrying Diana. Membership is by invitation only, requires sponsorship from existing members, and the club has historically excluded women as members entirely, drawing criticism even from politicians who belong to it. What actually happens inside stays inside, by design, which is essentially the entire point of a club like this existing at all. The club's exclusion of women drew renewed public criticism in 2019 when then Prime Minister Theresa May attended a fundraiser there, prompting questions about why senior politicians were still associating with an institution that barred half the population from joining. Members reportedly still observe old-fashioned customs like a strict dress code and unwritten rules about discussing business inside the building, treating the club less like a bar and more like a living relic of a much older London. Number 21. Club 33, Disneyland, Anaheim, USA. Hidden in plain sight in New Orleans Square, Club 33 was originally conceived by Walt Disney himself as a private club for VIPs and corporate partners, though it didn't open until after his death in 1966. For decades, it operated with a members-only waitlist, reportedly running into the thousands of names and years of waiting. Membership fees have run into the tens of thousands of dollars, on top of steep annual dues, buying access to a secret bar, exclusive dining, and rooms regular park guests walk right past every single day without ever knowing they're there. The club expanded in the 2000s with a second location at Disney California Adventure, adding more capacity, though the waitlist remained long enough that some applicants reportedly waited over a decade just to get an offer. The unassuming door with the small gold 33 plaque outside remains one of the most photographed do not enter spots at any Disney park. Number 20. Mount Athos, Greece. An autonomous monastic republic on a peninsula in northern Greece, Mount Athos has been home to Eastern Orthodox monasteries since at least the 9th century and operates under a centuries-old ban prohibiting women and even most female animals from setting foot on the peninsula at all. The restriction, known as avaton, is written into Greek law and enforced by Coast Guard patrols. Male visitors need a special permit, issued in limited daily numbers, and are expected to follow strict monastic customs during their stay, including modest dress and, at many monasteries, no photography inside the churches. The peninsula is home to 20 monasteries and hundreds of monks who live largely disconnected from modern life, some practicing forms of asceticism that have barely changed in centuries. It remains one of the only places on Earth where an entire sex is legally barred from entry, a restriction the European Union has occasionally questioned without ever forcing Greece to change it. Number 19. Skull and Bones Tomb, Yale University, USA. Officially called the Tomb, this windowless building on Yale's campus is the meeting hall of Skull and Bones, a secret society founded in 1832 whose alumni have included multiple U.S. presidents and generations of American political and business elite. The society famously admits just 15 new members, or knights, each year, chosen through a secretive tapping process. Almost nothing about what happens inside has ever been confirmed by members, and the building's blacked-out windows have made it a source of speculation on campus for nearly 2 centuries running. Alumni have included both President George H.W. Bush and President George W. Bush, along with Senator John Kerry, who ran against the younger Bush for president in 2004, a coincidence that made for an unusually strange campaign trail footnote about two rival candidates sharing a college secret society. Occasional leaked photos and old member rosters have surfaced over the decades, but the interior itself has never been formally documented by anyone outside the group. Number 18. Yamantau Mountain, Russia. Deep in the southern Ural Mountains, Yamantau is home to a vast underground complex that Russia has never fully explained, despite decades of American intelligence interest. Construction reportedly began in the Soviet era and continued after the USSR collapsed, at a scale large enough that US officials speculated in the 1990s it might be intended as a bunker for top leadership in the event of nuclear war. Russian officials have offered various explanations over the years, including that it's simply a storage facility for valuables and food reserves, without ever providing verifiable detail to back that claim up. Satellite imagery has shown extensive construction activity around the mountain continuing well into the 2000s, long after any Cold War justification would have made obvious sense, which has only fueled continued speculation among Western intelligence analysts. It remains a closed military zone, and the surrounding region is subject to some of the tightest travel restrictions anywhere in Russia. Number 17. Mezhgory, Russia. A closed administrative city in the Ural Mountains built specifically to support operations at nearby Mount Yamantau. Mezhgory doesn't appear on ordinary maps the way regular Russian towns do, and residency is tightly controlled by the state. Like other Soviet-era closed cities, entry requires special permission, and the town's entire economy and existence revolve around supporting activity at the mountain complex it sits beside. Outsiders showing up unannounced isn't really a scenario that happens, since getting anywhere near the checkpoints without prior authorization simply isn't possible. Closed cities like this one were a common feature of Soviet planning, built around sensitive military or scientific work, and effectively erased from ordinary geography for decades. And Mezhgoria is one of a small number that continue operating under similar rules well into the present day. Even Russian citizens without a specific work-related reason to be there generally cannot obtain the paperwork needed to visit. Number 16. HAARP Research Station, Gakona, Alaska, USA. The High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program is a genuine scientific facility, jointly run at various points by the U.S. Air Force, Navy, and University of Alaska Fairbanks, studying the ionosphere using a massive array of antennas. It has also become one of the most conspiracy-laden sites in America, blamed online for everything from weather control to mind control, none of which researchers or independent scientists have ever found evidence for. The facility does host occasional public open houses, which makes it an interesting outlier here, though day-to-day access remains restricted to researchers and cleared personnel. HAARP's main instrument is a field of 180 antennas capable of temporarily heating a small patch of the upper atmosphere to study how it behaves, technology that's genuinely useful for understanding radio communication and satellite disruption. Ironically, the more the facility has tried to explain itself publicly through tours and research papers, the more some corners of the internet have insisted that's exactly what a weather control machine would say. Number 15. Yucca Mountain, Nevada, USA. Designated by Congress in 1987 as the planned site for the United States Permanent Underground Nuclear Waste Repository, Yucca Mountain has never actually opened for its intended purpose, tangled for decades in political opposition, funding fights, and environmental review. Extensive tunnels were dug and studies conducted, but the site remains, technically, unfinished and unused, existing in an odd limbo as a facility that's simultaneously heavily restricted and not fully operational. Public access has never been permitted regardless, given both the sensitivity of the site and the material it was designed to eventually hold. Roughly $10 billion was spent studying and partially building out the site before funding was effectively cut off in 2011 under the Obama administration, following years of fierce opposition from Nevada's congressional delegation and residents who never wanted the country's nuclear waste stored in their backyard. Various attempts to revive the project have surfaced since, none of them successful, leaving miles of tunnels sitting essentially frozen in time underneath the desert. Number 14. Heard Island and McDonald Islands, Australia. About as remote as inhabited planet Earth gets without leaving orbit, this Australian external territory sits in the sub-Antarctic Indian Ocean, roughly 4,000 kilometers southwest of the Australian mainland, and includes an active volcano called Big Ben. There's no permanent population, no infrastructure, and reaching it requires a lengthy, expensive sea voyage through some of the roughest waters on the planet. Australia requires a permit for any visit, largely to protect the pristine, human-free ecosystem, and in practice almost nobody bothers, which keeps the islands about as untouched as anywhere left on Earth. Fewer expeditions have landed on Heard Island than have summited Everest, and most of those that did go were small scientific or amateur radio teams willing to endure weeks at sea just for a brief window on land. The island's glaciers and volcanic activity make it genuinely unique for research purposes, studied specifically because almost nothing about it has ever been altered by human presence. Number 13. Kumsusan Palace of the Sun, Pyongyang, North Korea. Originally built as a residence and office for Kim Il-sung, this palace was converted into a mausoleum after his death in 1994 and now also holds the embalmed body of his son, Kim Jong-il. Entry is limited almost entirely to North Korean citizens on organized visits and select foreign delegations, under conditions that include strict dress codes and mandatory bowing before the preserved bodies. Independent foreign tourists are essentially never permitted inside, and the small number of outsiders who have gone, usually as part of official diplomatic delegations, report an atmosphere of tightly choreographed reverence, monitored at every step by guides ensuring proper conduct. The building reportedly cost hundreds of millions of dollars to convert and maintain, an enormous sum for a country that has struggled for decades with food shortages and economic isolation. Visitors who are permitted entry describe being required to bow before both bodies in a specific, practiced sequence, with no deviation tolerated. Number 12. Challenger Deep, Mariana Trench, Pacific Ocean. The deepest known point in Earth's oceans, sitting nearly 11,000 meters below the surface, has been visited by fewer people than have walked on the moon. Jacques Piccard and Don Walsh made the first descent in 1960, and it wasn't visited again until filmmaker James Cameron went solo in 2012. The pressure at that depth is roughly 1,000 times what it is at sea level, which is why forbidden here isn't a government rule so much as physics simply refusing to let most equipment, let alone people, survive the trip down. Since Cameron's 2012 dive, a handful of other expeditions have followed, including submersible pilot Victor Vescovo, who made multiple descents starting in 2019 as part of a broader project to reach the deepest point in every ocean. Even with modern engineering, each trip still requires custom-built vessels designed specifically to withstand pressure that would crush most submarines instantly. Number 11. Pangar Fort, Rajasthan, India. Built in the 17th century, Pangar is often labeled India's most haunted location, with local legend blaming a curse from a sorcerer scorned by the fort's princess for its abandonment. The Archaeological Survey of India, which manages the site, doesn't officially endorse the ghost stories, but it does enforce a strict rule anyway. No one is allowed inside the fort between sunset and sunrise, with signage explicitly warning visitors of the restriction. Whatever the actual reason, the fort sits open by day and firmly sealed the moment the sun goes down. During daylight hours, it functions as a popular, fairly ordinary historical tourist site, with guides walking visitors through its temples and palace ruins while cheerfully mentioning the curse along the way. Local police reportedly do patrol the area after dark, specifically to enforce the restriction. less out of belief in the supernatural, and more to prevent trespassing incidents on unstable, centuries-old structures in near-total darkness. Number 10. Los Alamos National Laboratory Restricted Zones, New Mexico, USA. Born out of the Manhattan Project in the 1940s, Los Alamos remains one of the United States' primary nuclear weapons research facilities. And while the surrounding town has grown into a normal community over the decades, large portions of the laboratory grounds remain classified, fenced, and closely guarded. The lab still conducts sensitive nuclear stewardship and weapons research work today. Public museums nearby tell the history of the Manhattan Project in detail, especially since the site gained renewed public attention following the 2023 film Oppenheimer. But the active research areas themselves stay exactly as closed to outsiders as they were when Robert Oppenheimer ran the place in the 1940s. The lab today employs thousands of scientists working across nuclear security, energy research, and other classified programs, and background checks for employment can take months given the sensitivity of the work involved. Number 9. Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, California, USA. Established in 1952 during the early Cold War, Lawrence Livermore conducts nuclear weapons research and, more recently, gained public attention as home to the National Ignition Facility, which achieved a landmark nuclear fusion ignition breakthrough in December 2022. Despite the very public science communication around that achievement, the bulk of the lab's grounds remain restricted, requiring security clearance for entry into most buildings. It's a strange split identity, a facility that happily announces its scientific milestones to the world while keeping nearly everything else about its operations firmly behind locked doors. The 2022 fusion breakthrough involved firing nearly 200 lasers at a target smaller than a peppercorn, producing more energy out of the reaction than was put in, a result physicists had chased for over 60 years. That single experiment happened inside a lab where most of the surrounding buildings, doing entirely different, far less publicized work, remain completely off limits to the public. Number 8. Portondown, Wiltshire, England. Home to the UK's Defence Science and Technology Laboratory, Portondown has conducted chemical and biological defence research since 1916, making it one of the oldest facilities of its kind still operating anywhere in the world. It gained global attention in 2018 when British scientists there analyzed the nerve agent used in the poisoning of Sergei and Yulia Skripal in nearby Salisbury. The site has a long, occasionally controversial history involving human testing programs decades ago that later prompted government inquiries, including a 2004 inquest into the death of a serviceman during Cold War-era nerve agent testing in the 1950s. Today, it remains tightly secured, with access limited to cleared scientific and defense personnel only, and the surrounding land is dotted with warning signs and fencing that make its purpose fairly obvious, even to passing drivers who have no idea what actually happens behind the perimeter. Number 7. The Tank, the Pentagon, Virginia, USA. Formerly the National Military Command Center's secure conference room, the Tank is where the Joint Chiefs of Staff hold their most sensitive strategic discussions, a room specifically designed to be electronically shielded against eavesdropping. It's been the site of major wartime decision-making across multiple administrations, and its existence, while publicly acknowledged, comes with almost no detail about what actually happens inside on any given day. Access is limited to the highest levels of American military leadership, and unlike much of the Pentagon, there's no version of a public tour that gets anywhere close. The room has reportedly hosted decision-making during the Gulf War, the September 11th response, and countless other moments where the Joint Chiefs needed to speak candidly without worrying about being overheard by anyone, foreign or domestic. Its physical shielding is regularly tested and updated, since the entire value of the space depends on nobody outside that room ever knowing exactly what was discussed inside it. Number 6. Naval Base, Kitsap, Bangor. Strategic Weapons Facility, Washington, USA. home port to a fleet of Ohio-class ballistic missile submarines, this Washington state facility reportedly stores one of the largest concentrations of nuclear warheads in the United States. Security here includes armed patrols, explosive detection systems, and layered perimeter defenses befitting a site holding that much destructive capability in one place. Peace activists have occasionally attempted to breach the perimeter over the decades to protest nuclear weapons, almost always resulting in swift arrests. For obvious reasons, there has never been a tourist-friendly version of getting anywhere near the actual weapons storage areas. The base is home port to multiple Ohio-class submarines, each capable of carrying more destructive power than every bomb used in every war in human history combined, a fact that tends to put the size of the security response in some perspective. Local activist groups have staged demonstrations at the gates for decades, part of a broader anti-nuclear movement in the Pacific Northwest that predates most of the current security infrastructure by many years. Number 5. Denver International Airport restricted underground levels, Colorado, USA. Denver International Airport has become something of a conspiracy theory magnet since it opened in 1995, thanks largely to its unsettling murals, a horse statue with a well-known unsolved death behind its creation, and persistent rumors of a secret underground bunker system. Airport officials have repeatedly stated the restricted underground areas are simply automated baggage handling infrastructure and maintenance tunnels, nothing more exotic than that. Whether or not you buy the official explanation, the fact remains that ordinary travelers walking through the terminal have zero access to whatever actually is down there. The airport leaned into its own reputation in later years, embracing the conspiracy chatter with tongue-in-cheek marketing rather than fighting it, including gift shop merchandise joking about lizard people and secret tunnels. It's a rare example on this list where the mystery itself became more valuable to the place's identity than simply explaining it away ever could have. Number 4. Buckingham Palace Private Apartments, London, UK. While parts of Buckingham Palace open to paying visitors each summer, the private apartments where the royal family actually lives remain permanently closed to the public, full stop. The palace contains over 775 rooms in total, and the small residential portion used day-to-day by the monarch and immediate family is treated with the same privacy any home would be, just with significantly more security around it. Even staff movement through certain areas is carefully managed. It's a rare case on this list where the forbidden reasoning is refreshingly simple. It's just someone's actual house. The palace's staterooms open to the public for roughly 10 weeks each summer while the monarch is away at Balmoral, giving visitors a controlled glimpse of the building's grandeur without ever venturing anywhere near the private residential wing. Security around the private apartments increased noticeably after a 1982 incident in which an intruder named Michael Fagan managed to enter the Queen's bedroom undetected, a breach that remains one of the most infamous royal security failures on record. Number 3. Ryugyong Hotel Interior, Pyongyang, North Korea. Construction on this 105-story pyramid-shaped hotel began in 1987, and it was meant to be a crown jewel showcasing North Korean ambition. Instead, funding collapsed with the fall of the Soviet Union, construction halted for years, and the building sat as an unfinished concrete shell for nearly 2 decades before an exterior facade was finally completed in the 2000s. Despite the glass and lights added to its outside, the interior has reportedly never been fully finished or opened for business. No tourist, foreign or domestic, has ever been permitted inside a building that's dominated Pyongyang's skyline for decades. Its nickname among foreign observers, the Hotel of Doom, stuck early on and never really let go, even after the exterior renovation gave it a genuinely striking, futuristic look at night thanks to an elaborate LED display added to its glass panels. North Korean state media rarely mentions the building at all, an unusual silence for a government that typically showcases its architectural projects heavily, suggesting even officials aren't especially eager to draw attention to an unfinished monument. Number 2. Camp David, Maryland, USA. The presidential retreat in Maryland's Catoctin Mountains has hosted major moments in American diplomacy, including the 1978 Camp David Accords negotiated between Israel and Egypt under President Jimmy Carter. It's operated by the U.S. Navy and Marine Corps and functions as both a working retreat and a heavily secured facility for hosting foreign leaders. Unlike the White House, which offers limited public tours, Camp David has never been open to civilian visitors in any capacity, and its exact layout has remained deliberately unpublicized across administrations of both political parties for decades. The retreat has hosted world leaders from Winston Churchill to Soviet premiers during periods of high Cold War tension, and its rustic, low-key cabins stand in deliberate contrast to the formality of Washington, a setting reportedly chosen specifically to encourage more relaxed, candid negotiations between world leaders than a formal government building ever could. Number 1. De Beers Diamond Vaults, London, UK. De Beers has controlled a massive share of the global diamond trade for over a century, and its London operations include highly secured vaults where uncut diamonds are sorted, graded, and stored before distribution to buyers around the world. Security involves biometric access, armed guards, and reportedly some of the most sophisticated surveillance in the private commercial sector. As one former De Beers executive once told reporters, "You don't get a tour of this place, you get a job interview first." For a company built entirely on controlling scarcity, keeping the vault itself scarce to outsiders fits the whole business model perfectly. Rough diamonds sorted inside are sold to a small, invitation-only list of approved buyers, known within the trade as sight holders, who are given a box of stones on a take-it-or-leave-it basis, rather than through any open negotiation. That system, largely unchanged for generations, has helped De Beers maintain outsized influence over global diamond prices, all built on a supply chain that starts behind a vault door almost nobody outside the company has ever walked through. 50 places, and every single one of them stayed locked for a different reason. Nuclear paranoia, ancient tradition, corporate secrecy, plain old money, or a tribe that just wants to be left alone. Some of these places are forbidden because stepping inside could genuinely kill you. Others are forbidden simply because someone decided, decades or centuries ago, that ordinary people don't get an invitation, and nobody with the power to change that has ever bothered to. Most of us will never get anywhere close to any of them, and honestly, a fair number of them are better appreciated from exactly this distance, behind a screen, with no risk of an armed patrol or a venomous snake anywhere nearby. If this rundown had you leaning in, hit like, subscribe for more of these, and drop a comment on which one of these 50 surprised you the most.